Hello world, Mr. Girlymicro here again. We have returned from foreign climes and are now ensconced safely in a Girlymicro manor, where Girlymicro has asked me to talk about the trials and tribulations of living with someone who can't stop doing exams. Now, we are sitting here, we do have cups of tea in front of us, so if you hear any odd noises or scrapes or clumps and slurps...
It's because we can't do this without caffeine.
And other type noises, it's because we're just drinking our tea. Now, I think one of the earliest experiences I had with Girlymicro and her obsessive need to study at every opportunity was going back 17 years now to the early days of our relationship, where for a long time Girlymicro and Mother Girlymicro had dreamed of travelling to foreign clans far and wide and travel the Trans-Siberian Railway. Long been a dream of theirs, and then they realised that actually what would be really useful for two ladies travelling an intercontinental railway would be to have someone to carry their bags for them.
It's so true. I mean, we had a lot of luggage.
And so I was enlisted for that express purpose, although nobody told me at the time that was my express purpose for being on this journey. And so the thought was, well, going on a long train journey, a very long train journey, if not the longest train journey.
From Moscow to Beijing.
Albeit broken up with a few stops. And that there might be some spare time along the way. And that some studying could take place.
I mean, I was told by husband that other people, he wasn't husband then, he was delightfully reasonably
Passepartout.
Yeah.
I was your manservant.
Yeah, so he had been like,
muscle.
no one's going to study. Why don't you just take books like a normal human being? And I was like, no, this is the great moment. This is my window. This is my moment to really understand stuff. And I have all of these notes.
Here, future Mr. Girlymicro, take all of these notes, put them in your bag.
I even had them bound, didn't I? I had them ring bound so that they were like into a book to make it easier to actually like carry them across two continents.
Now, my dear beloved Girlymicro, what kind of certificate are we putting on this podcast? Because you're making me want to swear. An awful lot. So anyway, this bundle of notes. It was what the
Masters, Girlymicro Masters.
Micro Masters, is that what it was?
Yeah.
It was what, a couple of hundred sheets of A4.
Oh, easy couple of hundred sheets.
I'm going to claim it was like 2 reams worth of paper.
I mean, it was quite a lot. It was enough that you had to ring bind it in 2 lots of different things.
For the purposes of sympathy, we're going to call it at least 2 reams, right? And that went at the bottom of my bag. And I carried that across 2 continents.
You did.
And not once, dear listener, did it emerge from my bag to be passed in front of the eyes of the person who'd asked me to study it.
I think I unpacked it once.
Yeah. Now, we were also going to be on the train for several days at a time, and we weren't sure what food would be available. It was very, very foreign after all. But we knew we were going to have access to hot water. So, tea bags were an essential, but light. However, the boxes and boxes of cuppa soups weren't particularly light in comparison. And so the other thing that got binned the moment we got back was an awful lot of cuppa soups that weren't touched. When after having the first one, my dear Girlymicro decided actually you didn't like cuppa soups.
No, I mean, that is probably the summation of many things in our relationship. It's rather thematic that I will obsess about something and think it's a really good idea. And then very shortly after the first attempt, I will be like, yeah, I actually don't really like that. Let's never do that again.
Yeah. And so we had a fantastic time, but yes, there was an added kilo of weight or so of your blinking notes that I carried with me uphill and down dale across 2 continents.
And if only this was the only time a similar thing had happened to you.
Yeah, I should know by now, shouldn't I, really?
Yeah. And this was followed by the time that I ended up taking my Part 1 Royal College of Pathology exams, unexpectedly.
That would be the exam that you were planning to postpone and take the following year.
Yeah, and that said that you could just defer it if you weren't going to sit
That
it.
you were worried about missing the deadline for postponing it.
Yeah, and then had missed the deadline for postponing it, and so had to revise for it in 2 weeks.
Was it 2 weeks? Only 2 weeks?
2
I thought
weeks.
you had a little bit longer.
No,
than
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Which is why the hyperventilating occurred.
Hyperventilating, that's a good one. You need to work on that. You could make your fortune. So I on that day, I got a call at work with somebody going, and I was like, "Now calm down and tell me actually what's happened." And after a few more sobs and blubs, went, "I got to do an exam." I said, "Well, okay." Go to Waterstones or wherever it is, buy the books you need, and
I'll see you at home.
see you at home. And yeah, you arranged with your boss to take some study leave, and you crammed like a mad thing.
Yeah, for like 18 to 20 hours a day. And poor Mr. Girlymicro got his first true experience of what it's like to basically be nothing other than a question issuing machine, from having to go through reams and reams of cue cards at every opportunity. There was no conversation that did not involve some form of micro question. And that is when you learnt what your favourite virus was.
Was it part one?
Yeah,
Was it part one or part
I think
two?
it was part 1. What is your favourite virus?
It is. Is it Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever?
Yeah.
I have to remember which way around it is, because that's the reason it's my favourite, because it was named for political purposes, whereas it should be Congo Crimean. The Russians insisted it be Crimean Congo.
Yeah. And there we go.
Rocky Mountain spotted fever's a second.
I think
a close
Rocky
second.
Mountain spotted fever became more of a thing during part 2.
Oh, we do love a tick-borne encephalitis,
We
don't we?
do. I mean, I don't, because I hate them and I can never get the questions right, which is why Mr. Girlymicro ends up asking them so much.
Yeah.
And then this obviously all finalised with the somewhat horrific...
So hang on. Let's take a step back.
Yeah.
Okay, you're planning to do part 1. You
Yeah.
obviously had a certain level of knowledge anyway.
Yeah.
But instead of being able to postpone it, you had to cram for the exam with only 2 weeks prep.
Yeah.
And what happened?
Oh, I passed with like 80%, which, you know, it was all right. I was pretty happy with that. I don't think anyone else was happy with that. I don't think anybody else recovered from the trauma for quite some time. Just in time enough, actually, for me to sit FRC Path, which was an unknown level of trauma.
Now your father provided an excellent piece of motivation. He bought you a plaque, didn't he?
Yeah, that said, Dr. Elaine Cloutman Green, failure is not an option. I need everyone to know out there that failure is an option and it's okay. But apparently not in my household.
It's an option, but you don't know how to fail. I keep thinking that failing something would be a character building moment for you. And I'm trying not to be too smug, but you are a machine as far as it comes to retaining information.
The fear of failure is like a massive thing. I mean, FRC Path was the first time that I have come and had to look myself in the eye and really go, I don't know whether I will ever pass this. I had Mommy Girlymicro and I were up in Blackpool sitting the mock, and I had what was probably for Mommy Girlymicro quite a traumatic time when I tried to leave and was like, I can't do this. And I was on the phone to Mr. Girlymicro going, I'm just leaving. And Mommy Girlymicro was like, she's not leaving. She's going back to the hotel room and she's going for dinner.
Yes, you had to be restrained from fleeing in terror.
Yeah, failure is... it's a definite thing for me, and FRC Path was 6 months of just sheer terror in facing down that fear every single day, just worrying that I wouldn't be enough, to the point that Mr. Girlymicro got very little sleep, didn't you, darling?
I didn't. I did get very little indeed. There was one particular occasion that I recall where it was 4 in the morning, maybe?
Probably more like 2:30.
Well, there was a certain amount of my dear, are you awake? Because you're twitching and you're tossing and turning. Are you all right? And you said,
I don't know how to do an Indian ink stain. I'm gonna fail.
at which point I reached my phone and went, it's fine, it'll be on YouTube. And handed to the phone with the YouTube running of how to do an Indian ink stain.
To Cocker's near formans, for those people that don't know.
I mean, obviously. I went, there you go, watch that. And rolled over and tried to go back to sleep.
Yeah, I mean, he was a saint. He even took an entire suitcase, like a giant suitcase full of textbooks to the exam with me. And this suitcase was so burdened with books that it broke the wheels. It was so heavy.
Okay, so this was part 2 of the Fellow of the Royal College of Pathologists exam, your consultants exams. So that was somewhere in South London. It was a residential exam. It was 4 days in a row. 3.5 days solid, but it was what you call open book. So you could take...
Except it was supposed to be open book, but if you remember, the problem was they changed the rules a month before.
But you thought it was open book.
I thought it was open book, yeah.
Which meant you thought you could take all your textbooks with you, and so you did, and I humped them all the way to the South London on the Underground to wherever it was you were staying in.
Hospital accommodation.
For this exam, and then you didn't need them.
Well, I will say, in my defence, they gave me much comfort, because when I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and was, oh my God, I don't know X, I could just reach out of bed and pick one up and look at it.
Yeah. Now, at the end of this course, we were going away on holiday on the final day of the exam.
Yeah,
you were going
directly down to Cornwall.
Directly down to Cornwall. And so halfway... second or third day, I made the trip all the way down to this hospital in South London, south of the river this time. And
I know, with your reputation.
Retrieved the books that you were fairly sure you didn't need, and then humped them all the way back to north of the river, to Girlymicro Manor, so you didn't have to carry them all the way to blinking Cornwall and back.
Yeah.
But you survived that experience.
I did, and I came out stronger for it.
Some of us have never quite recovered, though.
Yeah.
And so we were left with... I mean, anybody planning on doing FRC Path, just don't. But if you did, it's a lot of hard work, and your partner may end up with a wider knowledge of certain viral organisms than yourself. And we did have literally like 3 crates worth of notes, books, flashcards, you name it. And the joy with which I then threw away some of that stuff afterward was immense, because it was filling half a room.
Yeah, and I was like, no one can touch it until it's official that I passed.
No, you can't tidy it up, leave it where it is. So the whole front room was covered in notes in random piles. And
I mean, this guy does deserve a sainthood, because I have to say, when I was doing FRC Path Revision, and I have a tendency to not really eat or drink when I'm really focused on stuff, he brought me a tea urn, so that all I had to do was swivel in my chair.
Be careful with that sainthood, because lots of things get burnt at the stake. Not sure.
In order to top up my cup of tea, so that I would at least have fluids. So before he went out to work at the start of the day, he would make sure that the 10-litre tea urn was topped up and that there were snacks within arm's reach, and he would leave. And he would come back many hours later and find me sitting in exactly the same position, but at least I would have had some food and water. So the reason that I kind of wanted to talk about this is because obviously I have Mr. Girlymicro and he's amazing in my life. All of these things are a team sport. And frankly, I'm not sure that I could have got anywhere near wherever it is that I've ended up without the support of my family. And it's not that you have to have family. It's not that you necessarily have to do this even with friends, but you need to reach out to peers and other people. If you're planning to go down this road, if you're doing this kind of exam that is all encompassing and kind of feels really exposing because you're putting yourself and your career on the line for it, you need your cheer squad. And I have been so lucky to have the best cheer squad, having faith in me when I had no faith in myself to get through. And so I just want to say a massive thank you really to my cheer squad. to Mr. Girlymicro and Mummy Girlymicro and all the other people that have kept the faith when I could not. All the opinions on this blog are our own.